to your word, and then I'll go back to the panel.
Thanks, Chair. Can I first say that all the presentations were probably some of the best we've actually had this committee, and considering that you're members of the public and not necessarily spokespeople for national organisations, I just wanted to say that. I suppose in opening remarks would be that I think sometimes we have to totally reevaluate our education system as often as we possibly can. It's something that we've inherited from the past. It's not something that's necessarily we do often enough, but if you go, as we did as a committee, to Finland, you talk to anybody in Finland about what is the underpinning ethos of their education system, they all know what it is. It's equality, and they'll constantly remind you this is the underpinning of our education system. I don't necessarily think that we have possibly reevaluated what the ethos is of our own education system that underpins it. It possibly is a choice of parents or ethos is the thing that guides our education policy, and that's something that myself personally, in a personal capacity, am comfortable with. I do have a problem with the fact that this obsession we have in Ireland, for historical reasons, linking education with religion. And far too often, I remember when I became a school principal the very first thing I was told was that pare down every decision you ever make and make sure there's a child at the centre of it. And far too often in education, we pare down decisions we make. There's geography, there's ethos, there's a whole lot of other interest groups, but far too often children aren't at the centre of it. And that's why I'm delighted that the vast majority of presentations here today had children fundamentally at the centre of what we're trying to achieve. Particularly taken by your own presentation, Mr. Malone, and obviously you're somebody who works in the field. The issue of admissions comes to the head where demand exceeds supply. And you do have a minority of schools who will use their admission policies to keep their schools, as monocultural as possible, as middle class as possible. And you do have a situation where you have School A, School B, School C, and I notice in my own constituency, School C tends to get all the traveller children, all the immigrant children, all the children with special needs, and other schools will utilise their admission policy and their ethos to ensure that they stay as monocultural and as a middle class as possible, because they're all in competition with each other and they all need the numbers to keep the school on the go. And that's another problem we have in our education system, this inter-school rivalry, this inter-school competition, and that's part of the problem. In terms of 25%, I have to say I absolutely completely agree with you. The idea that we would have a situation where son or grandson or daughter or granddaughter would actually have priority over somebody else, currently, it is an improvement. And I think what we have in this bill is certainly an improvement. It certainly isn't perfect. I don't think anybody would suggest that is. I think 25% is certainly an improvement, but I don't think it's necessary at all. I mean, how can you, if your father didn't go to secondary school, or if you come from another part of the country, or come from another country altogether, compete for a place in a secondary school on that basis? I am striving, I think other people are as well, for a society and a republic where children go to school together and nothing else is important. I don't think we have gotten our head around that yet, and everything else seems to be more important. But, and certainly, sorry Mr. McCabe, what you have brought up here today is an incredibly important aspect which we haven't considered properly up until now. And I think it's incumbent on all of us here to actually take what you've said on board and to work with it and to make sure it's reflected in the bill, because you are talking about the most vulnerable children who need to be reflected in legislation. So on that, I just want to thank you for your presentations and to say that, I think the spirit of what we're trying to achieve is acknowledged, but the nuts and bolts of it will be more difficult to achieve. But
okay,
thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thanks for that.